Okay, here we go. So I wanted to start with something fun. Just 2 feet on the ground. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. For those listening, the 2 or 3 people who listen. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully there's a few people. Just feel the ground beneath your feet. And become aware of the feeling of the fabric of your pants along your fingertips. Good. Deep breath. Feeling the air come in through the nostrils. Filling the body up and out of the mouth. Good. And now, open your eyes. Put your arms in the air. Put your arms in the air. Good. Good. Stretch. Big stretch. Yeah. Good. And open the wingspan. It's okay if you hit your neighbor. I'm just kidding. Okay. Good. Really open up the chest wall. Yes. Okay, now open up the face. See those teeth, or if you don't have teeth, it's also good. Open up wide. Yeah. Good. Smile big. Yeah, Ian's good at smiling. You're all good at smiling, But Ian has, a lot of chayin, that guy. Good. It's good to break out of whatever's weighing us down.
Taxes.
That's no joke over there.
Inflation.
That's a real nakuda. But for a moment or a few moments, we'll be able to be here right now. Oh, it's Tess.
Do I have the wrong one?
No, you're good. This is just the first edition. So
Is
it's
that
like
the first edition?
this is the second edition. So it's like you use that one. The Rebbe's not here. Use that one. It's page 46.
Could you send me the audio recording later?
Sure.
Awesome.
There
because
is.
Mike was interested, but he can't listen.
That's okay. No problem. I was listening to Torah from Rav Gersey, and as people have been seeing, Rav Gersey is going to give a shir tomorrow night, 8:30 over Zoom. Should be amazing. And he was talking about in a recent shir where we are historically, individually, collectively, nationally, where we are. And what he was saying is that we're doing really good, because the final leg of the journey, so to speak, in our journey from the beginning of time to now, we're at this point where we are being metakin our consciousness. We're healing our consciousnness. This is like maybe the Ikar Avoda. And we see this in our world. We see, maybe it's just because I'm a psych nurse, I'm getting these, like, on YouTube, I'm getting these commercials for therapy, like, all the time. Like, they're interviewing these people, and, hey, it's okay. It's okay to go to therapy, and it's all very interesting. Where there's sort of this big wave of interest in personal growth. People are interested in consciousness, in healing consciousness. And in the book, The Power of Now, which was written a number of years ago, but is sort of really speaks to the Nikuda, at least from in the non-Jewish world. I mean, he's talking about the evolution of consciousness in that book, but we're tapped into the only thing that we really have, which is this moment, right? And instead of being locked in the past, like we've spoken about in previous shirim, or anxious about the future, but basically, and I said this to a group of patients the other day, is a person can live a whole life and basically never be here. Just like miss out on life completely because they're always either in the past or they're in the future. And the tragedy is we're always, every moment is experienced now. So we want to be able to learn how we can be here now. And then Baruch Hashem, we have a new shir in the community from Dr. Perry, and who's is being mavar this nikuda, which is the nikuda of the door, of how can I be present? There's a saying, there's no present like the present. That's true. And so when we look at the teachings of our tzaddikim, and we're looking at it from the angle of Rabbeinu Zal and Rav Nosson Zal, but the whole inyan is das. The whole inyan is healing the mind in such a way that I can actually be here now, in all the different aspects of my avodah. That's why, or maybe this is my humble suggestion, but Rabbi Nachman is very big, as we know, on a person shouldn't be mayayesh on themselves. They shouldn't go into despair. Because number one, because despair is crippling and paralyzing, and I can't do anything in avodah. And if we understand Hashem as Yud Kei Vav Kei, as being, so to speak, then being in despair prevents me from actually tapping into that being, because I'm stuck in my stuff. We want to unstuck ourselves. So we have Esbodedus and a Zamra and all the different eitzes that Rabbeinu Zal gives us on how we can actually plug in to this moment. Does that make sense? You with me? Do you believe me? Okay. Don't answer that. You'll take my word for it. And we're holding here an oath test in Likutey Halachos, Halachah Alef, Hashkamas, HaBoker. And we're talking about how we're seeing this sort of idea of finding the good points as being expressed through tefillah, starting with korbanos and going through Sukkot Zimra. And now, Baruch Hashem, we're going to enter into the world of Kriya Shema, the ultimate inyan of Yichud, which we'll come to see. B'ezrat Hashem. So at this point, Rav Nosson is taking us into the third section of Shachris, and having found and refined the good points by reciting the passages of the korbanos and then turning those points into the nigunim of Sukkot Zimra, we now recite the blessings of Kriya Shema and Shema itself. So he says like this: Omrim Birkas Kriya Shema. Afterward, in the third part of Shachris, we recite the blessings of Kriya Shema. Umavarichin leShem Yisbarach al Chiddush Ma'asav Reishis and Shemei Kadosh B'Tov Kol Yom Tamid. This is like, we just take a moment to percolate on this nikuda, and we bless and thank Hashem for the renewal of the act of creation, stating that with His good He renews each day. That He renews each day continuously. This act of creation corresponds to the binyan of the building of the Mishkan, the construction of the Mishkan, which was built from the affirmation good points of the Jewish people. Because as taught previously, the design of the Mishkan is it matches the design of the act of creation. So thus, when we are reciting the blessings of Kriya Shema, in which we bless Hashem for His perpetual renewal of creation, it signifies as well the construction of the Mishkan. Now, just to sit with this point a little bit on this, that Hashem is recreating everything and every moment anew. Now, the psychological insight or the therapeutic nikuda from this point is that we're a new creation. But just because the moment prior was one way, doesn't mean that this moment right now has to be that way too. Even though all the momentum of my emotionality and my physicality might be saying otherwise. I've had it. I've done it. I've shared this nikuda in nursing groups where only when I'm really like brave and I'm feeling, enlivened. So it's been only a few times, or less, a couple times maybe, where I'm trying to make this point that just because the momentum of the moment of the previous moments was in one direction, doesn't mean I have to be a slave to that, and I can actually choose something else. So I'll get up and I'll dance, and they'll be like, "What the heck is going on with this guy?" But I'm breaking that forward momentum. And I'm saying that I'm an active agent here and I can decide something else because I'm a new bria, I'm a new creation. So why is that really important? Is because that stuckness that we often feel because of our past, that's only manufactured in our minds. And so the how do we say this? That sort of capacity on our end that we're imagining that I can't make a change is just, it's the shackles of the mind that's sort of keeping me way down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's mostly for Yidden, like who believe that Hashem recreates every second. But for someone who doesn't believe that, I could see it must be harder to.
Yeah, so, you gotta, it's like, there's like the sort of spiritual explanation, and then there's like maybe a psychological explanation, which they're probably, or definitely parallel. So, yeah, I was hoping they'd believe me. That they would just sort of take the psychological nakuda at face value and just be like, oh, okay. So for us, that's really deep because we actually can anchor this idea in literally how Hashem created reality, and it happens to have all this sort of psychological benefit. But you're right. You have to sort of buy into, like, if you believe you're a biological machine, then it's a hard nakuda to sort of wrap your mind around because you don't have free choice. You're just
What's different now?
right. Exactly. Hey, I like that jacket.
Thank you, sir.
Mostly I like your soles, but
Thank you. I got them from my parents.
that's very true. But that's the kavod, that's being megale, the inner point, the clothes that we wear. So talking about Maisa Bereshis, that Hashem is creating everything anew. It's not static, it's a dynamic process. And this is also paralleled in terms of the construction of the Mishkan, where we're taking all our good points and we're using the good points to build the Mishkan, and ultimately it's going to create the dwelling, the capacity or the ability for the Shekhinah to dwell. And we made this sort of point that this is very psychologically helpful because, as Rav Gurzy would often say, my biography is not my destiny. So, and that this moment I can decide to relate to this moment differently. I can decide to relate to this moment in a more conscious way. The previous moment I was sad, frustrated, anxious, angry. We just got my grandma got my daughter this book, the Book of Emotions. It talks about anger, happiness, sadness, and frustration, and relating to the emotions in a healthy way. So we feel these emotions. We get locked in by them. But the whole nakuda is that really I can actually tap into my state of das, into that state of higher consciousness where I'm recognizing, actually I'm not stuck. I can break free of the shackles. And of course it's the appropriate time of year because it's Yitzrayim, right? We're moving from, I think Rav Gurzy and if you go onto his website, he also talks about it in the Shirim, but he brings up this concept of moving from a mindset of Mitzrayim, so to speak, of Gullus, into the mindset of Geula. And the mindset of Geula is the mindset of Das. That really I can relate to this moment consciously. V'shan Eker Tikkun Tefillah, and the primary Tikkun prayer of Tefillah occurs there in the Mishkan in the base of Mikdash. Kamosh Shekasav Ki Veisi Veis Tefillah Yikra Lechol Ha'amim Nuam Hashem Elim Mekamitz Yidchei Yisrael V'Cholei. As it is written, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Interesting, all peoples. Because I'm just thinking about the point that you just said, because I think the development of consciousness in the modern times is people are hopping this more and more. This is why the book The Power of Now is so powerful, because people are like, there's a book called also The Untethered Soul, which is sort of also basically talking about Das. So the peoples of the world are being mechaven to this, and so now we're going to role model it. And then hopefully our role modeling of what it means to be conscious, engaged, alive people, we're like, we'll set the example for the nations of the world. And then Hashem's name and him will be Miyachid. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this ultimate yichud happen. Thus declares God, Hashem, who gathers in the outcasts of Israel. Ki ikar binyan beis hamikdash hu ayidei sheHashem yisbat mekabed nidchei Yisrael. For the primary construction of the Beis Hamikdash, the house of prayer for all peoples, is through Hashem gathering the outcasts of Yisrael. Ayidei shemotzi gam shehanidachim va'ovdim nekudas tovos mekabed osam al el hakadusha. He does this by finding the good points, even in the outcasts and those who have gone astray. And he gathers up those points into holiness. And by means of the good that will be gathered up entirely with the coming Mashiach, may happen soon in our days. Amen. The future Beis HaMikdash will thereby be built. And this is the significance of the side of the Beis HaMikdash being called this good mountain. V'sham ikar tiyukon tefillah kanal ki ikar tefillah hu rak al yidei atov shemotzin kanal. And when recited there in the Beis HaMikdash, tefillah is most rectified and has its greatest ascent, because the essential tikkun of tefillah is achieved only through this, by gathering all the good points that we find. Now, if you think he's belaboring this nekuda about the outcast, and even in the Poshe Israel, and needing to find the Nekuda Tova to speak, it's because we need to hear it many times before it sinks in, and we're shakua in the idea, that we're absorbed by the idea. There's a Torah in Likutey Moran, I think it's Torah 5, where Nachman talks about the Indian of clapping. He's also, I think there, or maybe it's Torah 10, I don't remember. It's one of the Torahs in the Likutey Moran. And he talks about Yisro, and how the greatest revelation of Hashem was when Yisro, who was involved in Avodah Zarah, says, no, Hashem is really... And so what happens is like, and I think this is the Nekuda that my cousin Rabbi Kalmus brings out, is that the hands are like the farthest, they're the farthest extremity, so to speak, right? And even they, when it's energized with that conscious awareness that Hashem is here, then we're just like, we can't help but clap, so we're clapping. So even the farthest extremities, so to speak, are revealing that Hashem is here. We believe in Hashem. Just like Yisrael, so to speak, who was farthest, the greatest revelation of Hashem was when he said, no, Hashem is here. Does that make sense? So that changes how we think about clapping and dancing now when we're at L'chadodi here. And we can be Mechav and say, no, we're being, ultimately, we're being Magali Hashem in a powerful way, vis-a-vis the clapping. And also Reb Nachman talks about how dancing, etc., is mitakin dinim. We can heal cosmic reality vis-a-vis our dancing. It's like, why it's so important, we have to help people shake up a little bit, move the body, move the goof a little bit, with all the nigunim. Shabbat. Okay, we got there. We got the Shem. It's a development. And so before we can recite the Shemona Esrei prayer, we recite the passages of the Korbanos and Sugei de Zimbra. Meaning, as we learned previously, we refine the good points, and by dint of this refinement, we're making these negudim. We're making these songs and melodies with which we praise Hashem. And after that, from these good points, we're able to build a Mishkan where the primary tikkun of prayer takes place. And this is the significance of why we recite the blessings of Kriya Shema, which are synonymous with the supernal chambers of holiness, which is an idea brought down in Kabbalah, specifically in the Zohar, in the Eitz Chaim, and in Shar Kavanas, the Drushi HaKadosh. Don't be so impressed, I'm just reading the footnote. The Arizal identifies the blessings associated with Kriyat Shema with the 7 primary chambers of holiness of Bria, the world of creation. Right, there are 4 worlds, maybe on a simple level, maybe there's a 5th, which is Adam Kadmon. It's beyond our pay grade, but basically, take a look at the footnotes, which could be Mavara, the Inyan in Kabbalah. But suffice to say, there's this reality called the supernal chambers of holiness. Bechinas Mishkan, Bechinas Beis HaMikdash, Shehem Heim, Halachos Kedusha. These chambers are a representation of the Mishkan, constructed in the wilderness in the Beis Hamikdash, which are the actual chambers of holiness in this world. So the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash are corresponding to these holy chambers, so to speak, in Shemayim or in the higher worlds, if you will. Yalkein Omrim Az Metolim Mechadish B'Chol Yom Tamim Ma'aseh Bereishis. And thus, in the Yotzei or blessing, which accompanies the Kriya Shema, we then say, with His good, He renews each day, Tamid, continuously, the act of creation. Ki Tzura de Mashkana de Tziyura de Ovada de Bereshis. For the design, hopefully really from people are listening to this because they're just going to be appalled by my pronunciations of things. But okay, at least we're trying.
You got this.
We got this. Yeah.
Hashem sees the Nekudos Tov.
Yeah, that's right. That's the point. It can't be perfect. For the design of the Mishkan, which is paralleled in the individual Mishkan we construct from our good points, matched the design of the act of creation as mentioned above in the Zohar's teaching. And so by reciting the blessing of Kriyat Shema, which signifies construction of the chambers of holiness, we renew the act of creation and build the Mishkan, a place of holiness from which our prayers have the greatest ascent. And what's coming to mind right now is we're partners in this process. Us and Hashem coming together to make this happen, where we are engaged in this sort of renewal of reality. And B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully, spending time with these ideas will help be machaya our own tefillah as we see that we're part of this cosmic process that's occurring. Having explained the purpose of reciting the blessings of Kriya Shema, Rav Nosson now turns to the passages of the Shema, and he's beginning by clarifying the mitzvah of teaching Torah to one's children. This was an idea that was a little bit vague, I think, when we got to it in the beginning about the children's breath, and hopefully I don't know if it'll be 100% clear, but hopefully it'll be a little bit more clear. And from there, from the aspect of the Mishkan built out of the good points of the Jewish people, the little children, school children, receive the breath of their mouths undefiled by sin. I'm going to read this footnote 72. In Bir Likutey, Reb Abraham Chazan explains that when a tzaddik reveals a person's good points, that a person's sins are forgiven. When a tzaddik reveals a person's good points, that person's sins are forgiven. Also, Reb Nachman says elsewhere, we often think that, let's say, you have someone in your life and you want to give them musar because they're not doing the right thing or something like that. So interestingly, Reb Nachman says, by finding the good with them, we saw this earlier, I think in this Torah, by finding the good with them, that actually helps them do tshuva. It's like sort of counterintuitive because we're like, no, you're messing up. But he's saying, no, help them see the areas that they're being successful in, and that will allow them to do tshuva. Because why? Because you're helping. Because the whole point is that the good inside of them is the elikus. So you're helping them identify with the godliness inside of them, and that's much more motivating than showing them all the areas that they're messing up in. And as well, Rav Weinberger is giving shir on the Indian of his bodhus, going through a particular sefer which I don't know the name of really, and he was saying. Yeah, it's not the famous one. It's a different book on this bodhus, but he's going through the idea of Likutey Tovos in the most recent shirim. What do I want to say on this? Because the Likutey they brought out was that people make a mistake, and they think that when they mess up, that's who you are. But you're not God forbid, you're not a Russia. You are a beautiful person who made a mistake. Welcome to the Normal Healthy Man's Club, or Women's Club, if there's women listening to this. The Normal Healthy Humans Club. So there's a big difference between saying, no, I'm really good. I made a mistake. As opposed to, I am just so bad. Right? We're never going to get off the ground in the Vodas Hashem if the way that we're thinking about ourselves is that there's something intrinsic where I'm like, I used to personally, by the way, I hope this is not oversharing, but I used to think like this myself years ago. I've gone slightly better, 2% better, but maybe 3. But I used to get very down on myself, and I would make mistakes. And it's like, London, it's okay. You're good. You're good. You're good. I mean that. You're good. You're good. Life is that dynamic process of working with it and growing. But it's energizing when I see myself as essentially good and I made a mistake, as opposed to the opposite. Then I don't want to do anything. That's the problem with people with depression, is that they're just so. I don't want to comment on clinical depression, just sort of like when a person is stuck in life.
I mean, it literally, for a lot of people, it's also a coping mechanism. I can't even tell you how many friends of mine wanted to buy the little icon of the smiling little dumpster fire that they sell all over Facebook. And there's an entire genre of humor that's dedicated to self-deprecation.
Really?
Oh, for sure.
Wow.
And then other people looking on the outside looking in are like, no, that's not funny. That's traumatic.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, you see, the funny part is, and it's not.
Well, yeah, right.
It's like the guy who's fat and makes jokes about how he's fat before anyone else can.
Right. Yeah.
Like Gabriel Iglesias, like he calls himself fluffy.
Aha. Right.
That's funny though.
I didn't even, is that a comedian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Iglesias from
So that's the idea. So here we go. Oh, back in the footnote. He is then like a young school child and can begin to study Torah and serve Hashem anew, with the purity of undefiled breath. Rav Gerzi, I think I've shared this point with you, that Rav Gerzi has shared that tzaddikim are like children with das, in the way in which they experience life. So when a person, so you have the tzaddik that's finding good in you, so to speak, that we get that reset. And it's like, we have that, tap into that undefiled breath and that sort of essential tamimus that's within us. Elsewhere, Rabbi Nachman links the school children's pure study of Torah with the Kruvim in the Mishkan, which had the faces of young children. Thus Hashem's called the Moshe Vayikra emerged from between the Mishkan's Kruvim, i.e., as the voice of the Torah, which is intrinsically bound with the voice of the young children who study it. Okay, Sarchian over there. This is the concept of Kriya Shema alluded to in the verse, you shall teach them repeatedly to your children, and teach your children to speak to them. For as we will see next, the essential aspect, here we go. Hold on to your stenders. The essential aspect of Kriya Shema is this yichud we effect by reciting it, and it stems from the aspect of good that has been refined. And through this biru of the good points, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shechina are brought into yichud. Ha'olaz mayin nukvim. And this is done via an arousal from below, the elevation of mayin nukvim, which is a Kabbalistic concept, which is pareres hashchina kivyachol chazimama bara ke'asena legabach, which is when the Shechina prides herself before Kodesh Baruch Hu, as it were, saying, see what a child I bring to you. Here we go. So let's just be mavar the Indian a little bit. So in Kabbalah, the yichud of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is the masculine aspect of Hashem, with the Shechina, which is the feminine aspect, is known as yichud. This is the mystical process whereby man's devotions bring about the manifestation of godliness in creation. The antithesis of this unification is the concealment of godliness brought about by humanity's sins. So our whole avodah here is to constantly be miyached the Kodesh Baruch Hu with the Shechina. This is being Megale Hashem in a certain shleimus, and we're the aspect of Hashem that's being involved in this avodah. And which this produces, as it were, a separation. When we don't do this, a separation between the transcendent and immanent aspects of divine influence. The Shechina is then said to reside in the darkness of exile with the Jewish people. Nevertheless, our prayers and mitzvot that we perform in the service of Hashem have the power to undo the concealment. Yes, and the state of exile, and reinstate the yichud. This is the basis of the custom of reading oneself to pray or perform some mitzvah by reciting the words, as you might, it says it in front of the various mitzvahs in the siddur, for the sake of the unification of Kodesh Baruch Hu and His Shechina. Behold, I'm prepared and ready for the mitzvah, because that is basically setting the tone for what we're going to be doing with this mitzvah. Okay, very important. Kabbalah speaks of two complementary energies in the universe: a descending force calling Mayim Duchrin, which is masculine waters, and an ascending force called Mayim Nuchrin. The spiritual energy that ascends from below is the consequence and the spiritual energy that ascends from below is the consequence of an arousal from below, this aruta dilatata, namely one's fulfillment of Hashem's will below in this world through Torah study, keeping the mitzvos, and tefillah, and in our example here, Kriya Shema. So typically this ascent of energy elicits a reciprocal arousal from above, and in the aruta dili so that the shefa, an inflow of a divine benevolence, descends for the benefit of mankind in the world. So we're in this constant relationship with Hashem, where what we do here affects and brings down, so to speak, shefa from above. That's like, my rendition of this sort of concept, which is obviously a very nuanced, sensitive, delicate concept, but that's sort of the idea. And all this comes about by dint of our finding good points even in Jewish sinners. For this is the concept of elevating Mayim Nukvim, to elevate the fallen sparks of holiness from the deepest depths of the klipos. So we see that we're hopefully getting a sense of that this is much more than a nice psychological idea. There is massive spiritual processes that are taking place simply by training ourselves to be mavakesh the good in yourself, in other people, in life. And we are mamish elevating. This is the whole Nakuda when we talked about level, like quality of consciousness. Right? We're elevating all those sparks back up to its source, or their source. And this is ultimately preparing for the ultimate geula. Or maybe it's even, we could say it's like we're actively engaged in the unfolding of the geula vis-a-vis this process. And the Shechina takes exceptional pride in this, because this, namely, that the furthest from him draw closer is the Hashem's greatest glory, as the Rebbe has written a number of times in his teachings. Kad asi Yisro daika kidan is talik ve'is yakir shema kujibrichu ila vetata. This is also written in the Zohar. It was, and this is what we mentioned earlier, it was precisely when the idolatrous priest Yisro came to join the Jewish people that the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was exalted and glorified above and below. All around was Hashem's name glorified. Ki daika keshenis romu v'nis alu anukuna tovach menuchim lamata ma'od. For it was specifically when Yisro joined the Jewish people that such an exalted unification was effected, since the good points that were embedded in the very lowest levels of idolatry were raised up and elevated to holiness. This is what the Shechina particularly takes most pride in, so to speak. And this, by the way, is therapeutic. This is medicine when we think about where we find ourselves in life. That in our own journey of tshuva, we are, in effect, influencing and bringing tremendous kavod to Hashem. But you can only bring. We don't hope to fall. We know that falling is part and parcel of life, so we don't pray for it. But when it happens, we now have the opportunity to come back, and in our capacity to come back, we are bringing incredible kavod to Hashem. So it's precisely hopeful. And no matter where a person finds himself, and it's a delicate point, because I don't know where you've been. I say that to patients too. I don't know where you've been. So I talk about chizuk and I talk about hope. It's a sensitive conversation, because these people have suffered. But the emes is the emes, and we have to be able to sensitively share that even in the place that you find yourself in, right? And this is why Rabbi Nachman is Nassim is also they're bedafka ambiguous. They don't say the place, as we said in previous year. He's fallen to the place where he's fallen. That means different things to different people. But that means that tzaddik might be one thing, where that means the Aaron London is entirely different, is something entirely different. But nevertheless, the idea is true at all times. That in my process of coming back and finding the good and doing tshuva and praying and davening, so it's commensurate. So the commensurate with the revelation of Hashem's glory is to the extent that, like, the farther I have fallen, so to speak, and I come back, wow, that's a massive revelation of Hashem's glory. Again, we don't want to do an avera. We don't want to fall. When it happens, now I have this opportunity. That's sort of the idea. The ayat is and as a result of this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shechina are unified. Pichinas Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Kiyadua. This is the yichud alluded to in the opening verse of Kriya Shema, as is known from Kabbalistic teaching. And the footnote says, if you want to look where Shar Kavanah, Shar Kriya Shema, that the Arizal teaches that the words Yud Kei Vav Kei Elakim Yud Kei Vav Kei signify a great unification. This unity, which is especially manifest in the Mishkan, is alluded to in the verse. The Mishkan will be one. It is true that in the Mishkan that all the good points, which are the sparks of godliness, should become encompassed in His oneness. Because Maschilin is Pala Tefillah Shimon Esrei Maschilin Adonai Savasi Titachulei. I said it. I hope that was okay, because we're learning. And then, after reciting the Shema, we begin to pray the Shemona Esrei prayer, commencing the words, "My God, open my lips." Ki ayidei kanal ayidei daika yecholin smile. As a result of all the above, specifically owing to this, we can effect the unification after which we will be able to pray. So after we're miyached HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Shechita, we open up our mouth. This is because through finding the good points and creating a Mishkan, we bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shechina into Yichud, and we can then open our mouths, so to speak, with words of Kedusha, But this is the essential ascent of the good, namely that it rises to the dimension of perfected speech, that's what we're engaging in the Shemona Esrei. And so, before we step into the Shemona Esrei, we supplicate Hashem in regard to this. Hashem, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. It's amazing that we see the evolution of this idea vis-a-vis every shlav of tefillah. Kabbanos, Sugat Zimra, Kriya Shema, Shemona Esrei itself. Any questions, comments, concerns? And if again it sounds like we're reading this idea into different aspects of our Jewish experience. So now we're in the aspect of tefillah. But we have to be patient with Nassim, because it's like he's Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of chazar of the idea. It's because we have to. This is it. This is like he begins to Likutey Halachos with this discourse for a reason, because sort of everything can hinge on this. The quality of one's life can hinge on this.
He's building a lattice.
Exactly. Boom. It's exactly what it is. Very good. Here, take this and teach.
Maybe next time. Gotta get to some more reading. I like the way you present it.
Baruch Hashem. It's a team effort. Deep breath in.
I didn't want to do that. I had a pretzel before I did.
We began with an exercise to break out of our constriction, to open up the mouth, stretch out the face. Okay, my friend, pause here.
I kept having